Inspiring travel. Watch now on iPlayer.
Hello, I'm Christian Fraser. You're watching The Context on BBC News. The BBC reveals the former Harrods boss, the late Mohammed Al Fayed, has been accused of rape by 5 female ex-employees. The Metropolitan Police says it is aware of the allegations. Welcome back. 5 women say they were raped by the late owner of Harrods, Mohammed Al Fayed, when they worked for him in his luxury department store. The BBC has now heard testimony from more than 20 female ex-employees who say the billionaire sexually assaulted them, as well as claims that Harrods helped cover up those allegations of abuse. Mohammed Al Fayed owned Harrods until 2010. He died last year at the age of 94. The store's current owners say they are utterly appalled by the accusations. They added it has a process available to women who say they were attacked by Fayed, saying it has been our priority to settle claims in the quickest way possible, avoiding lengthy legal proceedings for the women involved. This report on the documentary that aired this evening does contain descriptions of sexual violence.
I joined Harrods because I wanted to be a buyer, and I ended up working for an absolute monster.
When Mohammed Al Fayed took over Harrods, he quickly embraced his high-profile role and the status that came with it. To his customers and the celebrity guests, he was all charm. But to many of his female employees, he was a different man, a predator. We've heard testimony from more than 20 of Al Fayed's female ex-employees.
He tried to rape me more than once.
And he pushed me in and onto the bed so that I couldn't move.
You know, he was 79, nearly 80, and I was 15.
Mohammed Al Fayed was rich and powerful. That power allowed him to carry out assault at scale over decades.
I think Mohammed Al Fayed is a rapist. I think he's a serial rapist.
Gemma worked as Al Fayed's personal assistant for 2 years.
Just didn't know which way to turn, so I bought a small dictaphone that I had in my pocket. And these are the transcripts from those recordings. One of them was in Paris, in his residence there, Villa Windsor. I said, I just want to go to sleep on my own. Mr. Fayed, I don't want to, Mr. Fayed. And he kept saying, relax, please relax. Like, how can you relax when you're in that situation? He walked out and he was angry.
Not long after this incident, Gemma says Al Fayed raped her. The BBC has heard testimony from 4 other women who say he raped them at his properties. In 2009, Gemma contacted a lawyer who told Harrods she was leaving her job on the grounds of sexual harassment. She didn't feel able to disclose the more serious allegations at the time. They agreed to pay a settlement if she signed a non-disclosure agreement. There was also one other condition.
The lawyers organised for a shredding truck to come to my lawyer's office. It was shredded in front of us, including tapes I had of him. Someone from HR was present for the shredding of all of the evidence I had. I thought I'd lost the transcripts, but actually what I did have was the transcriptions sent to my lawyer in my sent items of my email account.
In a statement, the current owners of Harrods said they were utterly appalled by the allegations and that employees who were his victims had been failed, for which they sincerely apologised. They also said that the Harrods of today is a very different organisation to the one owned and controlled by Al Fayed between 1985 and 2010. There were several attempts to expose Al Fayed before his death. But it is only now that many of the survivors feel able to speak publicly about the abuse. For those who have, the silence and the taboo are finally broken.
Helena Wilkinson reporting. Well, one of the voices in that documentary is columnist Henry Porter, who for 20-odd years was the London editor of Vanity Fair and has spent quite some time investigating Fayed and the allegations that were swirling around him. You're welcome to the programme. You published an article all the way back in the 90s that accused Fayed of routinely harassing his female staff. What sort of response did you get from him?
Well, we got a response which seemed frightening to begin with, but then turned out to be an advantage. He sued us on 3 counts, alleging that he was a racist, that he routinely spied on his staff, and that he was a routine sexual abuser, if I can put it that way. And what that meant was it opened up his life for us to investigate over 2 years. And we did find an enormous amount to establish and to prove and support the original article by Maureen North. So we put it together. But then what happened, they came to us and wanted to settle. And before we really got to terms of settling, Jodie Fayed was killed along with Diana in Paris. And our owner suggested that it would be kinder and more civilized just simply to settle it without any further argument. So all our evidence, which I feel very strongly about, and which in part is in the BBC documentary, by the way, a very good documentary, was locked up in storage. And so, that was 1997, 27 years ago. These allegations were current and available for anyone who wanted to investigate.
Why do you think those allegations never rose to a police investigation?
Well, I've been reading all the files tonight in preparation for writing for the Observer on Sunday. I have about 5 big files from the case in 27. And there is no doubt that police and Al-Fayed were very, very closely related. Al-Fayed had a number of people working for him from the Met, and there is no doubt that it was an open channel between them, and they did each other favours. I think it was one of the reasons that Fayed managed to survive so long without any serious police investigation.
You told the documentary team about an approach from Mohammed Fayed's security guard. Can you tell us what you told the team about that encounter? Because I think it will reveal to people who he had in his pay and how much control he had.
Yeah, there was a very broad activity against us. My house was swept the whole time for bugs. We were followed. We were threatened on the phone. And this one thing in 1997 came to our notice, that a man who said he had left Fayed's employ was coming to us with a videotape of his boss having sex in his office. They wanted to negotiate a sale of this. So I went to, I think, a gym where I met this man who seemed completely unbelievable. But anyway, he offered this tape. And I said, well, there's only one problem with your tape. If I buy it for the £5,000 you're suggesting, it will be buying and receiving stolen property. So I'm not interested. But they nonetheless tried to pretend and reported to us to the CPS, which is then the Crown Prosecution Service. And there was a kind of investigation, but it was ridiculous because they had tapes of me saying, no, I wouldn't dream of buying it. But it's the sort of tricks they got up to. And you can imagine a young woman being in their sights and a police officer and another or a private detective threatening them, implying all sorts of horrors. Could be very frightening for a woman of 21. And the pressure was that they shut up and didn't talk.
It's become clear that at least one woman who complained she had been sexually harassed had in fact been raped. And the BBC is now being approached today, I'm told, by more and more women. I think there is a press conference tomorrow with some of these women. Does it feel to you like we're only just scratching the surface?
I think it did. It did when I was investigating it all those years ago. I knew there were a huge number. I was always really surprised that we managed to get 7 people on the record in affidavits. I was really surprised. And we worked hard, but there was no doubt, and we came across names. I can think of 3 names tonight that aren't in the documentary for one reason or another, not by any fault of the BBC's, but simply it didn't work. So there are 3 other people. And I think there were a lot. My impression was you just had to, surf in the world that we were in, which was a glossy magazine world, in the advertising world. You hear people, just anecdotes of it. And that's, in fact, how I got 2 of our witnesses to talk to me, just by hearing of them. That's a key point, because the evidence was really available if you want to look for it. You didn't really have to look for it. It was just out there. because he was such a serial offender.
Goodness me. Henry, really good to talk to you. Thank you for coming on the programme.
Yeah, thank you.
Here we are again, Nadine. Someone in the establishment, someone protected by power, by wealth, seemingly an open secret, no police investigation, victims unserved.
It's just so incredibly depressing, and it's frustrating that this has come out after he's died, because he's going to have escaped the, obviously these are alleged crimes at the moment, but he's going to have escaped the consequences for what he did. He lived a life of power and privilege. Obviously, his life was also struck by tragedy when his son died in Paris. But fundamentally, these crimes he should have been held accountable for. And so often, and I as a political journalist, I even hear rumours in Westminster of things that people have gotten up to, and inevitably things come out in the press. And often there are things that people know about, but for whatever reason, news organisations aren't able to kind of report on it in the way that they would like to, because of legal reasons or concerns, or if the expense it could be if the other person decides to sue. And it's just very, very demoralising that so often in the UK, and I think across the world, if you're rich and you're powerful, you can do these heinous crimes and kind of get away with it. And my heart goes out to these women who obviously feel like they're able to speak out now he's dead, and no longer poses a risk to them legally, financially, or whatever. But it just feels like unjust that he's going to have gone to the grave without facing consequences for what he's, allegedly, but there's a lot of evidence for, seems to have done.
We've seen it again this week, Wills, with Hugh Edwards. A lot of people feel very angry and bitter that he's not gone to jail for the crimes he was convicted of. Of course, the BBC has history with Jimmy Savile, who, again, was a celebrity, part of the establishment, mixed in the royal circles. It was an open secret what he was like. How do we do better with this?
It's a very, very tough question, because when power and wealth and influence comes into play, a lot of these stories are shut down pretty quickly. And as a journalist in the US as well, that happens a lot. And we need to do everything we can to make sure the stories of whether they're women, men, children are heard straight away. And we need to use our voices as journalists to make sure they get out there. We can't be scared of this power influence. The lawyers can come at us and throw around vast sums of money. They can threaten lawsuits. But at the end of the day, we need to, using the press and getting these stories out there as widely as possible is the key way to do this. And also having as much infrastructure in place to make sure that these victims can share their stories around a corporate structure, which with many of these stories is what it comes around to, is that there is some entity within a company, whether it is a network, a news network, or a store like Harrods, which is imparting its influence to make sure that these allegations don't come out. And so we have to, whether it's with the police, whether it's with charities, make sure that these victims have somewhere where they can seek solace and make sure that they can share their stories without being scared of these influential figures.
Nadine, we've got two stories in the public domain right now about this appalling kind of abuse. You've got Mohammed Al Fayed, who raped female employees, and then in France, this Dominique Pellicourt, the rapist who drugged his wife Giselle so that dozens of men could have sex with her too. Men he met through a website, and there were 500,000 people who used this website, and tens of men who were prepared to come forward and do this. There's a problem here with men. I mean, both these cases demonstrate plainly that you don't have to be a psychopath to do this. You can be in plain sight. And that's what I can't understand.
Yeah, I mean, it is a men problem as well. I mean, if you look at the statistics for violence against women and girls in the UK at the hands of men, it's disturbing. Every year, Jess Phillips, now government minister, but when she was a Labour MP in opposition, would read the number, the women that had been murdered at the hands of men in the UK each year, and the list just seems to get longer and longer every year. If you look at the conviction rates for rape and sexual assault, it's dire in the UK. There is an epidemic of male violence against women and girls, and it often feels when there is an attempt to have a discussion about it, like I think Labour were talking about, making misogyny, extreme misogyny, which we have to, there is a difference between just being sexist and extreme misogyny, which can often go into violence. A hate crime, there was lots of criticism and commentary on whether or not that's going too far. But if you look at the statistics and you look at the way in which women are treated and have historically been treated at the hands of men, there's a serious problem here. And I as a woman in society, I just don't. There is nothing more we can do as women. This has to come from men. And
it's really interesting you say that because Wills, I've been a bit squeamish with my own family that my daughter gets reproductive rights education, reproductive health education, and my son gets information on toxic masculinity. And I sort of worry in one instance about with sort of telling boys, young men, that there's something wrong with them, that it's in there. But at the same time, we have to change attitudes, don't we? We are changing attitudes in the workplace such that I hope it's called out more. But equally, we have to change attitudes of the way young men think about women.
Yes, it starts at a young age, and it's interesting the dynamic in the US classrooms at the moment, because there are certain Republicans who want to bring in certain legislation that stops conversations about these areas. And it covers a matter of things, basically, talk about female sexual reproductive, birth control. Abortion is obviously an enormous issue coming into the election, and it will be an enormous issue across the country for years to come. And so there is a battle going on in the classroom that may end up in children not really learning fully about some of these consequences. And that's where you have to start formulating the mind. And when politics gets involved, then it's going to create a lot more issues. And that's something that drastically needs to be fixed over here as well.
If you want to watch that documentary, incidentally, you can follow it on the BBC. More on the story, listening to the new season of World of Secrets from the BBC World Service. It's on BBC Sounds, and of course the documentary on the BBC iPlayer. And I should say, if you've been affected by any of the issues we've been discussing here tonight, you can find advice on the BBC Action Line on our website. Let me just bring you an update on our top story that we were discussing a little earlier on the situation in the Middle East. The British Foreign Secretary David Lammy has called for an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon's Hezbollah after a week of escalation that's brought both sides to the brink of war. Tonight, he says, I'm calling for an immediate ceasefire from both sides. We're very, very clear that we want to see a negotiated political settlement so that Israelis can return to their homes in northern Israel, and indeed Lebanese can return to their homes in the south. So, a new statement from David Lammy. Now, it is time for the panel. Will, since we're in boxers and we do so many Zooms every day, you're going to pick up on some new science about why we're all exhausted.
Well, I'll tell you, I didn't deliberately pick this grey background just for this segment because apparently, according to science, this is a background, or the colour of this background is one that will make you least tired if you're on Zoom calls every day. So the research that came out, it says that if you have an animated or a blurred background while you're on Zoom call, you're more likely to feel more lethargic because your mind is more engaged with what's going on in the background, and it's likely to make you more drained. Whereas if you have a plain background, like this grey background behind me, then you're more likely to get through the day. However, Zoom meetings have been going on for far too long, and we've seen many upsets and many glitches with Zoom meetings. For instance, I'll always remember a Texas judge who accidentally turned into a cat a few years ago during COVID. That. So one way to get around being less lethargic is to get out there and meet people in person. I know sometimes that's not possible, but that's one way to do it.
I feel soothed. And I feel engaged, Will. So thank you very much for the backdrop. Nadine, you're going to pick this story about the archaeologist who was beaten to it by another archaeologist.
Yeah, this is an amazing story where a French dig team of student archaeologists found an archaeologist note that was written 200 years ago. And it reads about how it says PG Ferret, a native Dieppe, member of various ancestral societies, carried out excavations here in January 1825. He continues his investigations in this vast area known as the Cité de Limbs, or Caesar's camp. I'm very bad at French, so apologies to any French viewers in terms of my ability to pronounce those words.
From one archaeologist to the other, get in line. I've already been here. How extraordinary.
Yeah, and I did classics at university, and I love archaeology. I love going into the past.
So you liked that one. Listen, we're out of time. It's been really good having your company. Thank you for your thoughts this evening. Nadine and Wills, they'll be back very shortly on the programme. We will be back same time tomorrow. Hope you join us for that. Good night.
Hello, I'm Sarah McKearns at the BBC Sports Centre. Arsenal have kicked off their Champions League campaign in Italy against Atalanta, and there's just about 20 seconds left of stoppage time. And while it has been a frustrating evening for the Gunners, but they can thank their keeper. Well, away from the Champions League, then the new Women's Super League season starts tomorrow with defending champions Chelsea hosting Aston Villa live on the BBC. Both clubs start their campaign under new management, but for Chelsea's Sonia Bonpastor, the stakes are high, with the Blues aiming for a 6th successive title after the departure of former head coach Emma Hayes.
When you are Chelsea, you just want to win every single title. You want to compete in every competition, and we know, like, all the teams will be ready. It will be tough, but we feel ready. And, the players are really competitive. I think I am also really competitive, so this is about it. And we like to be in that position, to be able to compete.
Cricket now, and Travis Head scored a superb unbeaten 154 as Australia saw off England by 7 wickets in the first one-day international at Trent Bridge. England looked in good shape, with Ben Duckett striking 11 boundaries on his way to a hefty 95. But the hosts lost their last 8 wickets for just 102 runs as the Australian spinners bowled England out for 315. In reply, Australia lost Mitchell Marsh and Steve Smith early, but the informed Travis Head stayed put. A magnificent 154 to put the Aussies well in control. And Marnus Labuschagne hit the winning runs with 6 overs to spare. So the tourists went 1 up in that 5-match series. So they will next meet on Saturday at Headingley. Rory McIlroy got off to a good start to the PGA Championship at Wentworth, despite a pretty bizarre moment in his opening round. The world number 3 was hitting his approach here into the 12th hole when his club head flew off after impact. McIlroy still managed to card a birdie on that hole, eventually finishing his round in a tie for 4th on 5 under par. It is England's Matthew Baldwin, though, who leads the way on 7 under, thanks to shots like this at the par 4 16th. That helped him card a blemish-free round of 65. In Super League, Wigan retained their league leaders' shield with a 64-0 win at home to Salford. Red Devils head coach Paul Rowley made 14 changes to his squad, having already secured a playoff spot last week, a decision that went unpunished by the RFL and was taken full advantage of by a rampant Warriors side who registered 11 tries without reply. Elsewhere in tonight's other game, Huddersfield beat Castleford 34-10, with neither team able to make the playoffs. Well, the new Men's Rugby Union Premiership season gets underway tomorrow with a repeat of last season's final between Bath and champions Northampton, while Saracens get underway against Gloucester on Saturday, with new skipper Maro Itoje looking to take inspiration from those who have captained him in the past.
I've been very fortunate to play under great captains like Owen, Brad, Alistair Hargreaves, Steve, very briefly. And yeah, they've all been great. They've all been tremendous leaders. I guess from my point of view, I just want to be my authentic self. I want to lead with energy, lead with excitement, lead by my behaviors and my actions. And, since I've come back to the club, I've seen a whole new generation of young, exciting players coming through. And I think this season, as people watch Saracens play, they'll get to know some of these young players who are ripping up trees and training and training the house down. So I think part of my role is to help them, be what I think they could be. I think a lot of them are going to be great players, and I want them part of my role, I guess, as captain, but as well as just being a senior player, is to ease that transition, make that transition as seamless as possible for a lot of those guys. In the same way, the senior players when I was 20, 21 helped me.
Saracens' new captain, Mara Toche there. Well, that is all the sport for now. Remember, you can stay right up to date using the BBC Sport website and app, but bye for now.
Good evening. It has been another day when things have felt more like summer than September. Most places got to see at least some sunshine, and along the south coast today, temperatures got pretty close to 25 degrees. But in the southern areas, things are set to change as this area of low pressure pushes northwards over the next few days. That will bring some showers, some thunderstorms, and see how the rain is set to accumulate in some locations. It is possible that some places in the south could get close to a month's worth of rain. But notice further north, not much rain at all. It is going to stay largely dry across northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland. Warm sunshine up towards the northwest, often quite cloudy and cool close to these North Sea coasts, and with the chance for those showers and thunderstorms down towards the south. Now, in the shorter term, tonight, we are going to see a lot of cloud filtering in across many parts of the UK, and even where we keep hold of some clear skies, say across parts of Northern Ireland, we could see a few fog patches, a little bit on the chilly side across northwest Scotland down into Northern Ireland. Further south and east, though, with the cloud and the breeze, a mild start to Friday morning. A lot of cloud around first thing, that tending to retreat towards the east coast, but staying pretty murky, I think, for parts of northeast England and eastern Scotland. And then we start to see these showers and thunderstorms breaking out across parts of Wales, southern and southwestern parts of England. We could see a lot of rain in a short space of time. And those temperatures, if anything, a little bit down on where they have been. During Friday nights, we continue to see this feed of cloud into parts of northeast England, eastern Scotland, staying quite murky here through Saturday. Sunshine for western Scotland and Northern Ireland, but further south across England and Wales, I think we'll see more of these heavy downpours and thunderstorms, perhaps the worst of those from the Midlands westwards into Wales and the southwest of England. Temperatures north to south around 16 to 22 degrees. Into Sunday, it looks like we'll see the showers joining into longer spells of rain. Again, though, confined to southern parts of England, the Midlands, Wales. Further north, largely dry, best of the sunshine to the northwest. Quite murky for some of these eastern coasts. And then, as we head on into next week, it does look very unsettled. Low pressure is set to be in charge. We'll see some rain at times. It could potentially be quite windy